Hi guys, this is Karan Ratti here again, the skin scientist, and welcome back to this video where I talk about why sunscreens don't work. Why is it that every time you apply sunscreens, you go out traveling or you're going out in a lot of sunlight, you still get tanned? And you say to yourself, hey, I've been applying sunscreen a lot. I've even been repeating sunscreen like every 1 or 2 hours as I've been advised, but still I'm getting tanned, sometimes even getting sunburned. So this video is super important. I haven't come across any video or any explanation that goes in depth of why sunscreens don't work, the truth behind sun protection, the detailed science. And you know what? Nobody's going to tell you this because you need somebody who is not just a formulation chemist, but also a skin scientist who has done research on sunscreens. Because sunscreens is such a complicated topic that most of the times brands and even research firms tend to dilute the details and come up with these broad numbers like you need SPF 50, you need PA 4 plus or 3 plus, whatever it is. And because these are numerical values like 50, 30, 15, or you've got plus, they're just easier to understand for everyone, for you, perhaps. And so it's just something that people don't really go into the details of because it's just a complicated subject. But the details is where the devil lies, okay? So you need to really understand this, and please bear with me. I'm going to try and keep this video as short as possible and as condensed as possible, but sunscreen is a super important topic because you don't want to keep applying chemicals after chemicals on your face without actually getting results for it. So here's the truth. Before we start about why sunscreens don't work, which I'm going to talk about, I want to tell you about what sunscreens really are. Sunscreens were made to actually protect your skin against UV radiation. Now, UV is just one component, total sunlight that we get, okay? And we're going to talk about the wavelength. Wavelength is basically light travels in a wave. So in order to understand light better, different lights have actually different wavelengths. So researchers decided that the wavelength, which is basically the length of this one wave, is going to be assigned a certain light. For example, blue light has a shorter wavelength than red light. So sometimes we can say blue light, we can say red light, but in the academia, in the research areas, we kind of talk about wavelength. So UV radiation amongst the entire wavelength of sunlight that we get on this planet falls between 280 nanometers to about 400 nanometers. From 280 to about 320 is UVB, is classified as B, and from about 320 to 400 is classified as UVA. Now, UVB causes sunburn, whereas UVA is responsible for pigmentation, premature aging, and in some cases also sunburn if you spend enough time in the sun. So what's this whole thing about SPF rating? Is SPF really required? Do we really need PA? There's a lot of marketing stuff that is involved in SPF. And because it's very easy to put a number on it, SPF 15, 30, 50, you think that 50 is better than 30 and 30 is better than 15. But I can tell you that's not really the case. Most sunscreens fail at being able to protect your skin at the rating that they've given. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about this rating. But before that, I want to tell you about the UVB and the UVA component. There's also UVC. Most of the UVC, which is very carcinogenic, actually gets filtered out from our planet because of the ozone layer. So if you're traveling to some place where the ozone layer is very thin or non-existent, and that has happened in the past because of CFC gases, they destroy the ozone layer, there your exposure to UVC radiation can become very high. And the UV, even tiny amounts of UVC is actually carcinogenic and can cause skin cancer. So maybe when you're traveling next time, try and see where the ozone layer is actually thinner and try avoid traveling to those locations, especially without sunscreen. And I don't even know if there's a UVC filter that's available in sunscreen. So I don't know if you can get protected against it. But I assume that some UVB filters can actually protect you against UVC. But maybe that's something you want to see. All right. Now, UVB. A lot of the UVB also gets filtered because of the ozone layer. So you actually only get, here's the interesting fact, only 5% of UVB radiation. Amongst the total UV radiation that comes from the sun, you only get 5% of UVB. The remaining 95% is UVA radiation. So do we really need a lot of UVB protection? We do need UVB protection because UVB is very high energy. Even though it's just 5%, the energy level is much higher compared to UVA. But UVA is almost 95%. So even at less energy, it's equally damaging. All right. Now, UVB radiation varies from place to place, geography to geography. If you are in certain areas where the weather is clearer and the sunlight can fall through very easily, UVB radiation will be higher. UVA will kind of remain the same throughout the world. I mean, because it's 95%, even if it varies from 85% to say 100%, you still have a lot of UVA coming. So UVB, however, can differ from location to location. If you're in a place like near the equator in the south regions, let's say you're in India and you travel to the south of India, the sky is very clear and you have direct sunlight, you have a lot more UVB and UVA than if you were traveling in Europe. But most of the sunscreens are formulated based on measurements in Europe. So they don't always apply to every other place. For example, if you're using an SPF 50 in, say, France, where sunscreens were actually first made, they might not remain SPF 50 in other locations because you have a lot more sunlight and a lot more UVB radiation that's coming in those locations. And so the SPF measurement has changed now. Because the SPF measurement was determined based on how much UVB you're getting in that location, if you're getting more UVB here, the SPF rating is going to be lesser. So you're not really fully protected, all right? So it's important to remember that SPF varies by location to location. Where you have a lot of cloud cover, it's very rainy, or there's a lot of dust in the atmosphere, there's a lot of fog or smog, the UVB component is going to be lesser. But UVA, being of longer wavelength, can actually travel deeper through the atmosphere. And so it's kind of the same wherever you go around the planet. So you still need UVA protection, not just UVB. But why this differentiation? Why is it that you need UVB in some places, you need UVA in some places? Well, you need both, right? But think about it. When it comes to UVB, because it's of a shorter wavelength, it can travel less in the skin. But if you have darker skin type, then UVB radiation penetrates even lesser. So people who have darker skin type are not that worried about sunburn, which is caused by UVB more than UVA, because their melanin in the skin, the color of our skin, is naturally protecting us as a sunscreen against UVB. But UVA can still penetrate and cause premature aging. It can cause tanning. It can make your pigmentation worse. If you're somebody who has pigment-prone skin, you get tan very easily, or you have melasma, or you have patches, or you have diffused hyperpigmentation, also called post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Typically happens after any kind of skin damage. Then you want to make sure that you have a lot of UVA coverage, not just UVB. You probably don't need a lot of UVB coverage. You do, but not a lot, not as important as UVA coverage. So the fun fact, I've made another video of the origin of sunscreens. It's a short video, it's a YouTube short, so you can actually have a look at that on my channel. It's very interesting. Basically, where I told about how when sunscreens were made, they were made in this country called France and a city called Nice, which is in the south of France, near the beach. It's actually a beach town. A lot of people in France, the rich and wealthy, used to go down there back in the 1990s, early 1990s, to get tanned, but which caused a lot of sunburn. Now, people from Europe, people from the US primarily has a lot of, I mean, it's a migrant country, right? So a lot of people from Europe actually moved to the United States. So largely the population has very light skin tone. But usually countries that have people with lighter skin tones tend to get burnt very easily because they don't have enough melanin to protect themselves against UVB. So SPF, which protects against UVB, became of prime importance. Now, here's the fun fact. People in the West, you've seen how they love to sunbathe. Why? Because they want tanning. They want to get that slightly brown, tanned color. But for tanning, you need to have some UV radiation. You need UVA. Not in a lot of quantity. You need it in a lesser quantity, but you need more UVA to actually get tanned. So it makes sense for people with lighter skin tones who are trying to get tanned to not protect their skin against UVA as much as they need to protect their skin against UVB, because that causes sunburn, it causes redness, peeling, irritation, and can cause cancers. So UVB protection, which is SPF, became of prime importance in all the foreign brands. So even now, if you see, even in other countries like India, where you have a lot of foreign brands and sunscreens by foreign brands, you'll find that the SPF is of prime focus and the UVA protection is not really of that much focus, although it's become a focus now. So you will find that PA rating as well. But SPF is primarily what they were looking for in the West. And because these brands actually make one formulation that they want to supply all over the world, so they don't have to make different versions of it for different countries, they'll actually just make one sunscreen with a lot of UVB protection and then supply it all over the world. And because it has an SPF 50 rating, you think that it's good enough for you and that you can use it. But I'm going to talk about why sunscreens don't work even with SPF 50 or a PA rating. They don't work as well. And I want to talk about that. So coming back to why lighter skin tones need more SPF, I've already explained. But darker skin tones need more PA rating. So if your sunscreen says PA plus, and then depending on how much UVA protection it has, it can go to a maximum of PA 4 pluses. So PA plus, 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 plus. Beyond that, you can't go on the packaging because the kind of standards that we follow right now globally for rating a product or rating a sunscreen on the PA scale goes to a maximum of PA 4 plus. In some countries, SPF, for example, in the US, you cannot write SPF beyond 50. If it goes to 60, you can write 50 plus. But if it is between 50 and 60, you'll have to write 50. You cannot go beyond 50 plus because you don't get more protection from a higher SPF sunscreen. And that's a whole different topic. And I'm going to cover that right now in this video. So if you have darker skin type, focus on the PA rating. If you have lighter skin type, focus on both the PA and the SPF rating. Okay, so we've covered that. Now, why don't sunscreens work? They don't work because almost every sunscreen breaks down in the sun. And that is how sunscreens work. A lot of sunscreens actually sacrifice themselves. They break down. They take the incoming energy, they break down, and that's how they dissipate, meaning they get rid of that UV radiation by actually breaking down. And because sunscreens break down, they don't last on your skin. There's a reason why even the experts tell you, reapply your sunscreen after every 1 or 2 hours. But isn't that just so impractical? Imagine carrying an umbrella in a rainy season that dissolves when it comes in contact with water. Imagine it only lasts for 30 minutes to 1 or 2 hours. You're going to have to carry a lot of umbrellas. Who's going to do that? But if somebody made an umbrella that lasts a long time, maybe forever, you're going to actually switch to that umbrella because it's just so practical. Now, that's the exact same problem. We don't actually see that the sunscreen is breaking on our skin, which is why we feel confident after applying sunscreen that I can go out in the sun. I can travel. I can do whatever I want. But your sunscreen is breaking down. And even if you apply it after 1 or 2 hours, how do you know that your sunscreen hasn't broken down within 30 minutes? Our calculations that we've done at our company has shown us that even with 12 minutes of direct sun exposure, typical sunscreens that are made of the first generation or even second generation sunscreens tends to break down to half or at least enough that it's no longer the same level of protection that you need and you have a lot more radiation that's coming in. And if you have pigmentation, if you're somebody with pigment-prone skin, it's just a complete disaster because you're going to get tan, your pigmentation is going to get worse. And if you're trying to get rid of pigmentation, even with dermatologists recommended products, they're not going to work because on the one hand, you're trying to solve pigmentation, but on the other hand, your sunscreen's breaking down. So even the experts are going to tell you, listen, I'm giving you solutions for pigmentation, but you still have to apply sunscreen. The problem is the sunscreen is breaking down in the sun. Now, there are ways to formulate sunscreen and there are products that don't break down as much in the sun, but none of them have really written how long they last. There's just one brand in India. This is a brand that I have taken a front line in developing. It's called Melblok. It's a dermo-cosmetic brand sold by the top dermatologists in the country. And I can say that hands down because that's how it is. There's a lot of science in it. And their pigmentation control range, which has a product called the Pigmentation Control Day Cream, has an SPF of 50 plus. It has a PA rating of 4 plus, but it has been tested to last for 12 hours with minimal degradation. So about 2 to 4% degradation in the sun, but it still covers and protects your skin for 12 hours straight. So if you're somebody with pigment-prone skin, you can actually try and look at that product, the Pigmentation Control Day Cream, to help protect you. And also to decrease pigmentation because it's a pigmentation control product and it will help reduce pigmentation through a completely acid-free formulation, at least acid-free when it comes to the pigmentation and anti-pigment part of it. But there are other sunscreens as well. If you have a sunscreen that has some mineral sunscreen component, I've seen sunscreens from other brands that have both chemical and mineral components that theoretically can last very long. Now, how do you identify what sunscreen to choose? How do you make that decision which sunscreen is good and which sunscreen is bad? It's all about ingredients, right? It's all about the sun protectors that are in your product. If you find on the packaging, and you should always read the packaging to look at the ingredient list. Ingredients in your sunscreen, like ethyl hexyl methoxycinnamate, in the US it's called octinoxate. You've got homosalate. You've got, well, I'm going to talk about avobenzone, but avobenzone actually a UVA filter, but let's talk about it. Avobenzone is also called butyl methoxy dibenzoyl methane, BMDBM. If you've got these ingredients, even ethyl hexyl salicylate, although ethyl hexyl salicylate doesn't break down as much as the other ones that I've mentioned to you. If you have these ingredients in the sunscreen, then they likely break down way faster than if the sunscreen is formulated with third generation sun protectors. Okay. So that's important for you to understand. So this is how you can actually make a distinction. So how do you decide which sunscreen or which ingredients are actually going to last long? These are the third generation sunscreens. Try and find these in your sunscreen. I'm going to read out the names because they're very long, but you'll get a fairly good idea. If you have bis-ethylhexyloxyphenol, methoxyphenyltriazine, this, you have to search for this, unfortunately. Is just the way it's written on sunscreens. The packaging is going to be like this. In brackets, some people can write tinosob S. Or you have methylene bis-benzotriazolyl tetramethylbutylphenol, also called tinosob M. Or diethylamino hydroxybenzoyl hexyl benzoate, which is also called uvinol A+. These are third generation sunscreens that last very long. Sometimes ethyl hexyl triazine or EHT can also last long. So if you have a combination of these ingredients or maybe one or two of these, then that sunscreen has a potential to last longer than sunscreens without these ingredients, okay? So if you're somebody who has pigmentation, you're trying to get rid of tanning or you're trying to prevent tanning, then you want to go with sunscreens that have these ingredients or sunscreens that actually mention that they're going to last as long as 12 hours, because if you've applied sunscreen at, say, 7 a.m. in the morning and you're out till 7 p.m., you need that sun protection. If you're traveling to Europe or certain countries where daylight, where the time zone is set in such a way that even at 9 p.m. you have sunlight, and that happens, then you want to be able to apply your sunscreen early morning at 8 a.m. and it should protect you till 8 p.m. without you having to reapply it over and over again, which is, I've never seen anybody reapply this sunscreen. So, which is why this is super important. I've explained to you how to choose sunscreens, but why is it that despite there being actual sunscreens that brands can use, I'm talking about ingredients that are sunscreens, can be used in that sunscreen product, they still end up using all of these first generation sunscreens? Well, there are a couple of reasons. Number one is cost. The first generation sunscreens are very cheap, right? So they're very easily available. They're made in bulk. So when brands want to conserve cost, they end up using that. Now, the way they get around this whole stability issue is that they will combine them with other ingredients and try to increase stability. The best way is actually to combine it with mineral sunscreens, whether it's titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. They are going to help increase the stability of even the chemical sunscreens because they're going to reflect a lot of the UV radiation. And so the chemical sunscreen doesn't get enough radiation to actually break down as much, and so it'll last longer. That's one typical strategy. The others are you get stabilizers like octocrylene. Now, octocrylene can help stabilize avobenzone, which is a UVA protector. And then there are other sunscreens that you can use. So because there's so many different ingredients, you can actually have a lot of permutation and combinations to try and figure out how to increase stability, and you can increase stability. But if there are first generation sunscreens, they are going to break down way faster than third generation sunscreens. The second reason why brands end up using these are because it's about regulatory environment. What do I mean by that? The United States doesn't allow a lot of the third generation sunscreens, not because they're bad. Europe allows it, and Europe has some of the most strict standards for what ingredients are allowed. And India follows the European standards. So a lot of the sunscreens that you're using, a lot of, even just ingredients that you're using in India are going to conform to Europe standards because that's what India generally follows. It does allow for you to go beyond that, but generally brands follow the European standards. So these sunscreens are actually proven to work very well. They're very effective. In some studies, the safety has also been proven. The United States just hasn't come around to changing its laws for decades and decades. And that's actually a hot topic. Brands are really pushing the US government to change their laws because the studies show that those first generation sunscreens are actually not good for your skin. They break down, they release reactive oxygen species, which actually damage your skin. So you need a lot of antioxidants in addition to applying sunscreen. Otherwise, that sunscreen itself, while it's protecting you against the UV radiation, it's going to damage your skin by actually breaking down and releasing byproducts that are not good for your skin. So because, for example, say avobenzone is allowed in the US, but Uvinol A+, which is what I mentioned, diethylamino hydroxybenzyl hexylbenzoate, is not allowed, then brands are going to get rid of this one. They're going to use avobenzone and they're going to make one formulation that they supply all over the world. And that's easy for them to do. Rather than make variants for every different country, they're going to make one that is supplied all over the world. Sometimes it's both. They want the regulation as well as the cost. So even though they're not supplying that one sunscreen to the US market, they're supplying it to the Europe market, they're supplying to Southeast Asia market, the Japan market, they're still going to keep avobenzone, they're still going to keep ethyl hexamethoxycinnamate and certain other first-generation sunscreens, but they're going to combine that with third-generation sunscreens to make it more stable. My recommendation, if you can find a sunscreen that has only third-generation sunscreens, great. Or if it's a combination of third-generation and first-generation sunscreens, great. Or if it's a combination of mineral sunscreens with third and first-generation sunscreens, even better, right? So that's my take on this. People were asking me actually, Karan, for children, what's the right sunscreen? I mean, we don't want to expose them to chemicals, and they're absolutely right. Children should not be exposed to chemicals because regardless of what sunscreen you're using, the chemical will, if it's an oil-based sunscreen, all of these that I mentioned are oil-based sunscreens. There are water-based sunscreens as well. But if it's oil-based sunscreens, they have a high potential to actually penetrate your skin. And over regular use, they can enter your bloodstream. They can cause issues. But those quantities are fairly low. And if you're not a everyday sunscreen user with all of these first-generation sunscreens, then you should be kind of safe. One third-generation sunscreen that I mentioned to you, which is methylene bisbenzotriazolyl tetramethylbutylphenol, is actually a chemical sunscreen, but it behaves like a physical sunscreen and does not penetrate into the skin as the other oil-soluble sunscreens do. So search for this one. Search for mineral sunscreens with titanium and zinc. These are not going to penetrate into your skin as much. And with these sunscreens, they are much safer for children and infants who have very thin skin and don't have enough protection against these chemical byproducts. So have you ever seen sportsmen, cricketers that apply, that whitish stuff on their nose and on their chin and on the cheeks? That's actually pure mineral sunscreen, because pure mineral sunscreen, being physical in nature, does not break down. It's like putting white paint. What's that white paint going to do? White is appearing white because it's reflecting all of the light back. So that physical mineral sunscreen is going to reflect all the light back, which protects the skin. All right. So if you want absolute protection without the chemical load, then mineral sunscreens are the best. But the problem is mineral sunscreens make you look whiter. They've got this ghosty white cast that appears very bad. And so for that reasons, people often choose chemical sunscreens as well. But like I mentioned, if you have third generation sunscreens, then even the chemical sunscreens are absolutely okay and you're going to be protected. But remember, it's not just about the level of protection, whether it's SPF 50 plus or PA4 plus. It's also the duration of protection. So you need to have a good balance of both. In fact, even if you have SPF 30, it's still fine, because I haven't talked about this concept, but I'm going to tell you about this now. SPF 15 can protect your skin from 85 to about 95% of incoming solar radiation, depending on where you are on this planet and where you're getting the sunlight from. SPF 30 protects you against 95 to 97%, usually 97% of UVB radiation. But SPF 50 only goes up to 98 or 99%. So you're not really getting a lot more protection when you go from SPF 30 to SPF 50, but you'll have to apply a lot more sunscreen, or you'll have to have a different formulation of sunscreen to give you that extra protection. But even if you're using SPF 30, so long as it lasts long, SPF 30 is enough. It's become a trend in the market because it's so easy to put numbers on it that you think that SPF 50, because it's 50 and it's higher than 30, it's better. Not at all. There was a time when you could even put SPF 100 and SPF 200. It was never about the amount of protection. It was always about the duration of protection. SPF 100 is going to break down to SPF 50, then 30, then 15, then go to 0. So it lasts much longer in the sun, which is why sportsmen use a lot who don't want a white cast on them, on their skin. Even SPF 200 has been in the market. I've seen SPF 200 as well. It lasts even longer. But the efficiency of the sunscreen keeps going down very rapidly, exponentially, meaning it becomes less and less efficient as it's breaking down. So it actually starts breaking out faster after that first initial exposure. So the golden rule is try and use sunscreens that can last very long. Search for these ingredients that I mentioned, third generation sun protectors. And if you want indications of what brands can work for you, I've already talked to you about Melblok. Bioderma has some really good sunscreens, but they're just sunscreens. L'Oreal with its La Roche-Posay. Now, La Roche-Posay might not be available in India, but if you can get it from somewhere, La Roche-Posay has very good formulas where they're using these sun protection. And they've also put their ingredient called Melasil, which is an anti-pigment ingredient. Now, I actually have a brand called Melblok, which is an expert in pigmentation. I should ideally be recommending just that, and I do recommend it. But I have to acknowledge if there are other brands who are doing good in this area. My job when we started this brand called Melblok, it was not about trying to just make a lot of products. Otherwise, we would have had 40 products. We only have 7 products that we're actually retailing online on melblok.com. There's a reason, because every product has to do its job well. These are problem-centric products, meaning if you have a problem, you can just straight away identify, if I have pigmentation, I want the pigmentation control range. If I have dark circles, I want the dark circles and under eye cream. We don't hide behind, superfluous marketing trends like it has this flower extract or it has this ingredient. We don't even hide behind ingredients. We actually don't make ingredient the limelight. We don't make it center stage, meaning, it has 2% niacinamide, it has this, although the niacinamide concentration is higher. But we don't hide behind that, because the moment you get rid of what the product is intending to do and you're just using it because it has certain ingredients, you don't know what you're even doing. You're using so many different serums. You think you need 20 serums on your face. But the problem is the moment you combine one product formula with another product formula, the ingredients are mixing with each other and they can cause cross reactions, which means there can be other byproducts that are generated. I mean, you're playing chemistry on your face. Imagine combining 20 chemicals from this product and 20 chemicals from this product, putting them on your face. You think those chemicals are not going to react with each other? They're not going to create new chemicals? And you think you know what those new chemicals are going to do on your face? Sometimes hypersensitivity to products actually happens because of using too many products. So we don't follow that strategy. For us, it's really science-driven. Patented science is what we've banked on. I haven't seen a lot of companies in India that have started with a dermocosmetic brand that is sold by or recommended by the top dermatologists in the country that is backed by patents and is made in-house. I haven't seen it. And so we tried to do the most difficult thing that anybody would do, but we did it because I believe that it's important to give consumers a product that actually works, even if we're not really concerned about speed, right? It takes 30 days for the skin to renew and come to the surface. So you at least need to wait for 30 days to see the results of any product. But speed is less of a concern. Safety is more of a concern. And actually giving results is more of a concern. So if you found this interesting, maybe you can now search for better sunscreens to protect your skin and maybe even make better product decisions. And I'm going to cover this in another video where I talk about how many products you should use, what kind of products you should use to make it simple for you to identify. Sometimes just following people who are making content online makes it very difficult for you to understand because you've got so many different products and you end up changing products a lot. So I'm going to make a whole different video on that. This is a complicated topic in itself, but I hope you found this video. And if you got enlightened today, I know that now you know better. So hit that like and subscribe button because you want to stay updated. Comment, ask me any questions that you want. Comment what sunscreen are you currently using, and I'm going to try and identify whether that's good for you or not. If I get a lot of comments, I'm going to make a separate video. Otherwise, I'm going to try my best to answer the comments then and there itself. So absolutely comment and share this video with friends and family who you think will be benefited by knowing the truth behind sunscreens. I'm Karan Ratti.